Imagine a butterfly drifting through warm air somewhere in Brazil. It flaps its wings gently, a movement so small that it seems completely meaningless, just a faint ripple in the air. No one notices, nothing dramatic happens. But the atmosphere is a vast and delicate system where everything is connected. That tiny motion slightly alters the flow of air around it. The air currents shift by the smallest degree, pressure patterns change, clouds move a little differently. Hours pass, then days. The disturbance travels outward, growing and interacting with countless other forces in the sky until, thousands of kilometers away, a storm forms. And eventually, a tornado tears across the plains of Texas. This strange idea is known as the butterfly effect, a concept from chaos theory, suggesting that in complex systems, small beginnings can lead to enormous consequences. The tiniest change in starting conditions can eventually produce outcomes that are impossible to predict. And the unsettling part is that this principle doesn't only apply to weather. It appears in history, in societies, and in the quiet decisions that shape our own lives. Sometimes the smallest action, barely noticeable in the moment, becomes the beginning of something far larger than anyone could have imagined. In the 1960s, a meteorologist named Edward Lorenz was trying to understand one of the most complicated systems on Earth, the weather. Using one of the early computers available at the time, he created mathematical models that simulated how weather patterns evolve. These simulations used long strings of numbers to represent things like temperature, air pressure, and wind movement. By feeding these numbers into the computer, Lorenz could generate predictions about how weather might unfold over time. One day, while repeating a simulation he had already run before, Lorenz decided to save time. Instead of entering the full numbers from the original dataset, he rounded them slightly. For example, instead of typing a number like 0.506127, he simply entered 0.506. The difference seemed microscopic, the kind of tiny rounding error that should make no real difference at all. After all, how much could such a small change possibly matter? But when the computer finished running the simulation, the results shocked him. The new weather prediction didn't just vary slightly from the original one, it was completely different. Storms appeared in different places, pressure systems evolved differently, and the entire forecast unfolded along a new path. That small rounding change had quietly grown over time into a massive difference. Lorenz realized something profound. Weather systems are incredibly sensitive to their starting conditions. Even the smallest variation, something as tiny as a decimal rounding, can grow, interact with other variables, and eventually transform the entire outcome. This insight became one of the foundations of chaos theory, the study of complex systems where small causes can lead to unpredictable and disproportionate effects. In other words, the future is far less stable and far less predictable than we usually assume. To understand the butterfly effect, we only need to look at history. Sometimes the largest events in the world can be traced back to surprisingly small moments that seem meaningless at the time. Consider the life of Adolf Hitler. Before he became the dictator of Nazi Germany, he had a very different dream. As a young man, he wanted to become an artist. He applied to the Academy of Fine Arts Vienna, hoping to build a life through painting and creativity. But he was rejected. A single decision by an admissions board changed the direction of his life. Instead of pursuing art, he drifted into politics and eventually became one of the central figures behind World War II. Had that application been accepted, history might have unfolded in a completely different way. Another example happened during the final days of the war. The United States planned to drop the second atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Kokura. But on that morning, thick clouds covered the city, making it impossible for the bomber crew to see their target clearly. Because of the poor visibility, the plane changed course and flew to its secondary target instead, the city of Nagasaki. A simple change in weather, something as ordinary as cloud cover, altered the fate of an entire city and the lives of thousands of people. Even one of the most famous disasters in history contains a similar moment. When the RMS Titanic sailed across the Atlantic, the lookout crew did not have access to binoculars. The key to the locker containing them had been misplaced before the voyage began. Without binoculars, the iceberg ahead may have been spotted too late to avoid it. A small oversight, a missing key, and hours later the ship struck the iceberg, leading to one of the most tragic maritime disasters the world has ever seen. History often feels like the result of grand decisions and powerful leaders. But when we look closer, we see something different. Again and again, tiny moments, a rejected application, a patch of clouds, a missing key, quietly shape the course of the world. And that is the unsettling truth behind the butterfly effect. Sometimes the smallest details carry the greatest consequences. The butterfly effect isn't limited to weather patterns or dramatic moments in history. Today, the term is often used to describe how small, seemingly insignificant actions can produce massive consequences in complex systems. The concept became widely known through the work of meteorologist and mathematician Edward Lorenz, whose research in chaos theory revealed that tiny differences in starting conditions can eventually lead to drastically different outcomes. In other words, when systems become complex enough, even the smallest change can set off a chain reaction that no one initially expects. A clear example of this can be seen in financial markets. Markets are made up of millions of investors, institutions, and automated systems, all reacting to information at the same time. Because of this interconnectedness, even a minor event can trigger a series of escalating reactions. Sometimes, it starts with something as small as a rumor about a company or an unexpected piece of news. Investors begin to worry, and some decide to sell their shares to avoid potential losses. As prices begin to fall, more investors panic and follow suit. The situation becomes even more volatile when automated trading systems enter the picture. Many modern trading algorithms are programmed to sell stocks when prices drop past certain thresholds in order to minimize risk. But when many of these systems react at once, they amplify the fall even further. What began as a small disturbance can quickly cascade into a large-scale market crash within hours. This same pattern appears far beyond financial markets. Economies, ecosystems, and entire societies operate as complex systems where countless variables interact with each other. In these environments, cause and effect are rarely simple or linear. A small change in one part of the system can ripple outward in ways that are impossible to fully predict. Small actions rarely stay small. They multiply, spread, and amplify through the network of interactions around them. And sometimes, without anyone realizing it at first, those tiny beginnings grow large enough to reshape the entire system. The butterfly effect also carries a deeper philosophical lesson about how we understand our lives. Human beings naturally want the world to be predictable. We like to believe that if we gather enough information, analyze enough data, and plan carefully enough, we can forecast the future with accuracy. It gives us a sense of control. But reality is far more complex and far more chaotic than we would like to admit. Small variables we overlook, tiny events we barely notice, and seemingly insignificant choices can completely redirect the course of our lives. Think about the moments that shape a life. Rarely do they announce themselves as important. The person you randomly meet at an event, the book you casually pick up one afternoon, the opportunity you almost ignored because it felt too small or inconvenient at the time. In the moment, these decisions appear trivial, almost forgettable. But years later, when you look back, you may realize that those tiny moments quietly changed everything. Your career, your relationships, even the person you became. This idea challenges a common illusion that only the big dramatic decisions truly matter. We imagine life as a series of major turning points, the big job offer, the big move, the big risk. But often, those large events are simply the visible results of many small decisions that came before them. In reality, the smallest choices can produce the largest consequences. A slight change in direction, repeated over time, can eventually lead to an entirely different destination. That is the quiet power hidden within small moments, the possibility that something seemingly insignificant today could one day reshape the entire story of your life. If the butterfly effect is real, it carries an important implication for how we choose to live our lives. It suggests that small actions matter far more than we usually believe. We often wait for dramatic moments, a big opportunity, a major breakthrough, a life-changing decision, before we think real change can begin. But the truth is that our lives are shaped far more by the small things we do consistently than by the rare moments that feel significant. Tiny habits, repeated day after day, quietly accumulate into powerful outcomes. Reading 10 pages a day may seem trivial in the moment. It takes only a few minutes and feels like a small effort. Yet over the course of months and years, those pages turn into dozens of books, thousands of ideas, and an entirely different way of thinking. What begins as a minor daily action gradually transforms the depth of your knowledge and perspective. The same principle applies to physical health. Exercising for 20 minutes may not feel like a dramatic transformation. One short workout rarely produces visible change. But when those 20 minutes become a daily habit, they accumulate into hundreds of hours of movement, strength, and endurance over time. What once felt insignificant slowly becomes the foundation of long-term health and energy. Learning works the same way. Practicing a skill for 30 minutes each day may feel slow and almost unnoticeable at first. Progress appears gradual, sometimes even invisible. But as days turn into months and months turn into years, those small sessions compound into thousands of hours of focused practice. Eventually, what began as a small daily effort becomes genuine mastery. Just as small disturbances in a complex system can create chaos, small positive actions can create extraordinary growth. The butterfly effect reminds us that change does not always begin with dramatic events. More often it begins with quiet, repeated actions that seem almost too small to matter. And this principle works in both directions. Small mistakes, ignored habits, and tiny acts of neglect can slowly compound into serious problems over time. But small improvements, a better habit, a slightly wiser decision, a few minutes of effort each day, can compound into something remarkable. In the end, greatness is rarely the result of one enormous moment. It is the result of countless small actions that slowly, quietly reshape the direction of a life. The butterfly effect reminds us that the world is far more sensitive than it appears. When we think about history, we often focus on the obvious turning points: powerful leaders, great wars, and dramatic revolutions. But sometimes, history changes because of something far smaller, a missed opportunity, a passing storm cloud, or a butterfly quietly moving its wings. In our own lives, the same principle quietly unfolds. The future is not shaped only by the big decisions we carefully plan. It is also shaped by the small, almost invisible actions we repeat every single day, the habits we practice, the books we choose to read, the conversations we decide to have, and the tiny decisions we make when no one else is watching. Because in a complex world, even the smallest movement can ripple outward across time. A decision that feels insignificant today may eventually echo through years of your life. Somewhere in the ordinary moments of today, a small action you take might already be changing the course of your future. Thank you for watching.